Member for Oak Bay, Gordon Head.
I'd like to thank the member from Kelowna Lake Country and the member from Nechaka Lakes for their very thoughtful probing of this section in the legislation before us, and thank the minister and staff for their responses. Obviously, this is a section that affects us directly as 3 independent MLAs who were elected as BC Greens in the last election. And as the member from Kelowna Lake Country has said, we are not independent. We clearly ran on a platform. We clearly articulated that platform across the province of British Columbia, and the 3 of us were elected on that platform, the BC Green platform. So I agree with the member from Kelowna Lake Country is that when you run on a political platform, it's very difficult to be viewed as independent. Now, so obviously we support that statement. The question boils down to 3 versus 2 versus 4, and that's what we're debating here. When I look at this, I ask the question, what about the future? What about the next election? And I am drawn by the analogy to 2001, where we had a situation, and prior to that in the 1990s, where the Reform Party also had a number of MLAs, two MLAs sitting here in the legislature. And I look at that and I think that, you know, there should have been at the time party status for these people. The subsequent questions about whether the funding should be this or whether the names and titles should be that are very good questions, and I think we can address those in different fora. So, for example, LAMPC would deal with any funding issues. I agree with the member. It doesn't really make sense for 3 of us to have a deputy whip. Like
we don't.
We don't. So, I would like to put at ease. I'd like to put at ease the members opposite with respect to offices in Vancouver. Again, I think ultimately we are judged by the taxpayer. What would the taxpayer say, Honourable Speaker, if the BC Green Party were suddenly to get a big office in Vancouver with no MLAs sitting in Metro Vancouver? I would suggest, Honourable Speaker, that the jury of the public would be quite judgmental on that. And so this is not something we're actively pursuing because it's not something, frankly, that we think is correct. If there had been 4 of us and 2 were from Vancouver and 2 from Victoria, maybe a slightly different thing. So in our case, we'll probably not actively pursue this. But it's important, again, coming back to the 3 versus 2, to think, what about the next election? I hope that we can bring it upon ourselves to actively campaign in the upcoming referendum for proportional representation. I know that the official opposition will do that with the former official opposition. It's hard to take that off your I know I've seen other MLAs in the opposition say the same thing. I know that the government will campaign for it, as we will, obviously. And I know that in the throne speech of the summer, the BC Liberals said they were supporting a proportional representation, and there are members on record who support it as well. If we get this proportional representation on passing in the fall of next year, Honourable Speaker, we'll move to a 2021 election wherein there may be a multitude of parties. And wouldn't it be healthy for us to recognize a democracy wherein 2 parties can be recognized as 2 parties? Now, I understand, again, about we can't have, let's suppose 2 members opposite decide that they want to form the disgruntled Liberal Party and they so register according to rules, and they coming up to suggest that they should then have a question every day. Well, that's not something that's within we'd have to look to precedent there. We'd have to look to precedent, and it would start to become silly. Precedent in the House, of course, is that when the NDP had 2 and when the Reform had 2, there was a question a day, typically with a 3rd party. We haven't had 4 parties, and that would be a new precedent. I think we would look with members opposite very carefully and to say what is fair, what is truly representative. Is it that 2 members are disgruntled, now they figure they should have undue influence in this legislation? I'm not sure. They ran on a platform. They would have run on a platform that was a Liberal platform. But now they're suddenly claiming to be something different. There's a slightly different situation, and I'm sure, seeing the openness of the government here to providing us legislative drafters, that this is something that we could discuss. So I believe if we think to the future that the number 2 is the correct number in light of the history here in British Columbia, but I recognize I recognize the concerns that have been raised by both the member from Kelowna Lake Country and the member from Nechako Lakes, and agree that many of these concerns would have to be addressed. They're hypothetical right now, but they would have to be addressed, and I think that the legislation through which appeals to LAMPC, as well as through the legislature as a whole, could indeed address that if that situation to arise. But I don't think it'll arise till the next election anyway, because we have a big happy camp over on that side. Unless, of course, we could actually end this debate if two members opposite would like to come and join the BC Green Party here. We'd have 5, and away we go. We'll take 2. Anyway, with that, I thank you, Honourable Speaker.